Empire. We're getting more football, and we're going to talk about what it means, not just for us fans, but for the league, but most importantly, for the players. What's up, everybody? It's Mike Jones. Thanks for coming back for another episode of the Football Jones podcast. You can read me at usatoday.com. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at @MyMikeJones. As I said, getting more football. That's because on Tuesday, the owners voted to approve the expansion of the regular season from 16 to 17 games. This isn't a surprise. Last year, when they negotiated the new CBA, that provision was put into that deal between the owners and the players, so we knew this was coming. But there's still a lot of questions that you might have seen from fans or from yourself or even from some players on social media, despite the looming agreement that we knew was coming. So, to break it all down, going to a very good source who you've met on this podcast before, JC Tretter, Cleveland Browns center, also the president of the National Football Players Association. And he's got a lot of really good insight. He's going to explain to us how that deal came together, what the players got in return, and what it means for their health and safety and for the quality of football going forward. So we're going to get into it right now.
This episode is brought to you by Philips One by Sonicare. One up your brushing with Philips One. This one is the ideal one for those who are still using an old-school manual toothbrush. To all those people, it's time to take your brushing one level up. The solution is a simple one. It's the perfect timing one. It's the long-lasting battery-powered or USB rechargeable one. That comes in multiple colors to match you one. The one with a subscription that delivers new brush heads for just $5. Your teeth deserve this one. Philips One by Sonicare. One up your brushing. Learn more at philips.com/one. That's philips.com/ONE.
Okay, here we are back on the podcast. I guess it was about this time last year we had you on the podcast. JC Tretter, Cleveland Browns center, 9-year NFL veteran, I believe. Eight.
Just
going
finished
into
8.
9, right?
Yep.
Going into 9. All right. And it's going to be a successful 9th year. So I'm putting that on there for you. And president of the NFL Players Association. JC, how you doing?
Well, thanks for having me on.
Hey, thanks for being on here. I wanted to have you on because obviously this wasn't a surprise, but it was made official on Tuesday that the NFL owners voted to approve the expansion of the regular season to 17 games. And there's a lot of questions swirling around. A lot of people almost acting like this is the first time they heard about it. Some players even kind of reacting almost like it was something new. And so I figured you'd be a good person to give us a little refresher on all of this. So can you kind of take us back to last year when you guys were in negotiations with the CBA, how this deal got done to expand it to 17 games?
Yeah, so I think simplistically, that was pretty much the main crux of the discussion of the last CBA. And if we take a step even further back from that, prior to 2011, the NFL had the right to go to 18 games whenever they chose. And then in the 2011 CBA, the union leadership at that time negotiated that right away from the NFL, where they couldn't unilaterally decide to increase games. Fast forward now to last year, about a decade later, they wanted to increase games. So they had to come back to us and negotiate to increase that game. And there was no interest of going to 18. And then the discussion started on kind of what would it cost to get to 17. And that's what you see a lot of things in the deal that was signed. You see the increases, the substantial increases to minimum salaries, which are over 60% of our guys see immediate raises. You see we're getting 1% greater in our revenue share. On top of that, we got the media kicker based off these TV deals that the NFL just went out and negotiated. That percent revenue goes even higher based on how big those TV deals are. So that was part of it. We got better health and safety rules that continue to change, and we've just done a lot of good things in the CBA. So that was really the crux of the decision guys had was, is there enough in the CBA that makes you willing to play a 17th game? And in the end, it was a slim margin, but more players said yes, that was worth it. And once the NFL negotiated for the right to go to 17, it should have been everybody's expectation that was going to come. They weren't going to negotiate and give things up for the right to do something and then never do it. It would be a real wise negotiating move by them. So that it should have always been the expectation that we're going to go to 17 games either this year or next year. And then they had the decision because, again, they bought the right to do it from us. So we got things in return for that.
Gotcha. That's what I was going to ask you, what that bargaining chip was, because I think people say, oh, it's all about money. The owners are just getting richer. They got the big TV deals, but you guys did win as well. Like you talked about the minimum salary that jumped from what to what now?
I'll have to pull the exact numbers,
okay.
But I'll get those. I'll get those to you. But and again, I think sometimes it gets lost in translation. It's not solely the money. We have a lot of things we negotiate for as players, and it's not just, okay, well, what money did you get back?
Right.
You know, the work rules matter, the benefits matter. All those things are important to us, and we're negotiating kind of a whole inclusive package of what that costs. It's not solely, did you get enough money to do it? There's a lot more that goes into it than just financially what changed.
So it was better working conditions, the whole package. Just like when I go get a job, when everybody out there who doesn't play sports goes get a job, they're asking how much they're getting paid. They're asking vacation time. They're asking pension, benefits, 401k, all that stuff, health insurance. And you guys were like, we want a sweeter working condition package. And that's what you guys were able to get in exchange for the 17th game, basically.
Right. Yeah. The whole package.
Gotcha. So physically, mentally, how do you feel about the idea of playing a 17th game?
Yeah, I mean, everybody knows the grind of football, and after playing a few full seasons, you know how hard 16 games are. Now, let's not pretend that 17 games is out of the ordinary. There's a bunch of playoff teams that play 17 games every year and more than that. 17 games isn't something that nobody has gone through before. It's not uncharted territory. It will be, more of a grind on the body. But that's why it was so important when we discussed the 17th game was about getting those work rules to cover up for that added wear and tear, along with the facility, how long we can practice, changing how long our days are during training camp, changing how many practices there are, changing how long we can like all those things help on the front end to avoid the wear and tear through the whole season. And that's why that was such an important part of the negotiations too, not just the money, because we understand another game is another 65-ish snaps for guys to play every year. And that we do to change the rules to avoid that extra wear and tear on guys' body and actually get less wear and tear on their bodies by how we structure training camp in the off season.
Gotcha. And I just looked it up. So the minimum salary is now $610,000 if you have no years of service. That was last year. This year it's $660,000. Next year goes up to $705,000. The year after that, $750,000. So just to answer that question, since we asked there, but each year those guys, people think, oh, the football players are millionaires, but they're really not. But you guys were raising that for the younger guys, the new guys coming in, making sure they were taken care of.
Yeah, and I want to say that's like a 20% raise off of what it was. So, I mean, that's a substantial for over 60% of your player body to get 20% raises off the top is a pretty good deal for the majority of our players.
Gotcha. So you wrote, we're taping this Wednesday morning, and you wrote a column talking about things that we could learn from last year and kind of the way you guys had to adapt to COVID. But the off-season program, the change in training camp and everything actually led to better player safety. Can you kind of go through some of that for us?
Yeah, that was the unique thing about COVID was it forced us into a different football preparation world. And, we did a lot of things differently. We had virtual off seasons. We had an acclimation period in training camp. We had no preseason games. And one of the things we were really kind of waiting for when the season ended was, what does our injury data look like? What happened to our bodies this year? Anecdotally, I know I felt way better at the end of the year. I felt healthier. This is probably the best I felt in 5 years in my career. And no, talking to a lot of other guys, they feel better, both mentally and physically, at the end of the year. So anecdotally, we knew, okay, something feels better after this past season, but let's look at the actual data and see. And what you see is a 23% decrease in missed time this year compared to the 5-year averages before. You see a 30% reduction in concussions from the years before. You see the lower extremity strains being stagnant or down in every category. And that was something that we think we can still do better at, because the science is pretty clear on how to structure the program and get the coaches and the teams to buy into that science, protect our players from those injuries. So that's something we can do better. When you start talking about substantial decreases in concussions, missed time injuries, ACLs were, if not lower, on the lower tier of the usual ACL averages. And that was a big issue because in week 2, we had that big spike of players with ACL injuries. And I think that kind of morphed guys' outlook on what was going on with the season. I think people thought, wow, everybody's kind of hurt right now. And that's why it's important not to allow a small sample size to impact the entire view of what happened this year. And that's why it's important to look at the entire season. We were actually low on ACL injuries compared to previous years. So all that stuff just shows that what we did worked. What we did to prepare our bodies this year was good for us. And then in the back of the column, I talk about what that meant for the game of football, because that's going to be the first thing everybody said. It's great, you guys are healthier, but the game needs to look good. We don't agree with that. We think us being healthier is good enough. But we look at what the game did. When you compare performance, parity, the drama, all those numbers were way up this year too. We had way closer games, higher scoring, more teams involved in the playoff race late in the season. All that's good for the product. So when you have a year that you do things differently and you see injuries go down and all the performance data go up, I mean, you have to start looking at that of, okay, we should be building off of this, not forgetting about it and going back to what we always did.
Gotcha. So you guys, yesterday, the NFL informed teams that the 19th of April is the universal start date for OTAs, but has there been a determination on how much on-field work or how much virtual? How different is that going to look compared to last year or the year before that?
No, nothing's been decided. The only thing that's been decided is that we're pushing the new coaches, so it's a uniform start, and that way we continue to negotiate over. Our stance is we're still in COVID, and the idea last year was the COVID season is wrong. That was the first COVID season, and we're not out of the woods yet as a country with COVID. We're now seeing cases start rising again, and we're having Dr. Fauci and the CDC director come out and start warning about these cases that are going up, and that's something we have to deal with, and we can't just decide that we're COVID fatigued and we're done making decisions based off COVID. That's not how this works. And that's why we continue to negotiate with the NFL of how we best keep our players safe. And that was something we really prioritized last year. And we can't just decide prioritizing it this year because it's been a long year and a lot of tough decisions had to be made. And you can't just choose that, okay, we're done with COVID. We're not done with COVID. We don't decide when we're done with COVID. It's when and the world, conquers COVID is when we're done with it.
Gotcha. So, Roger Goodell said yesterday on the call with after the owners meeting that the 17th game now the product is enhanced. Do you agree that adding a 17th game has improved the product, or is that not really a factor in the enhancement of it?
Yeah, it's a descriptor of it. I think that's not really, as a union, our outlook on what the product looks like. We're concerned with the health and safety, the benefits, wages, hours, working conditions. That those are what we're concerned with. So when you talk about the product, we haven't seen a 17-game season, and it's a change that there are people who don't like change. So there's going to be that immediate pushback right away. But that was really why it was the NFL's decision. They bought the right, and they have to make the decision whether it's a product. They have to make the decision whether it's good for the league. Our decision was, are we getting enough as players to play this extra game? And then it's up to them on whether they want to do it or not.
When you saw some players, over the weekend kind of say, "Oh, this is stupid," or kind of be critical, how did that make you feel, being that you knew that you guys had discussions about this last year before you agreed to the CBA?
Yeah, I don't fault any player for not wanting to play a 17th game. Again, that whole the crux of the decision on that CBA. I don't expect guys to have changed their mind on the idea of not wanting to play a 17th game or being okay with playing a 17th game. I don't think 1 year or the acceptance of the CBA changes a person's mindset. If they last year said, I don't want to play a 17th game, and now we're going to play a 17th game after the CBA was passed, I don't think that just switches in a guy's mind where they're happy about it. So I don't fault any player. Again, it was a tight vote in the CBA, and the majority of players agreed that we should play a 17th game based off the stuff we were getting back in the CBA. But for the guys that still don't think it's worth it, I don't fault them for that outlook.
I like the expansion of the playoffs because that's like the most exciting time of the year. I understand sort of concerns that guys would have about playing an extra game. But I really don't like when I see fans like, "Oh, shut up, you guys are making a lot of money," or whatever, because I know I wouldn't want to, pick up an extra shift or extra, time tacked onto my work day unless I was being compensated. So I get that. Do you hear that from fans? And then how do you kind of explain it to them so that they see you guys are kind of, people lose sight that you guys are people as well?
Yeah, it's always a tough decision. And I think it's not just football players or athletes. I think all across different we fall into this trap of, instead of pushing everybody up and trying to push everybody to get better wages, better working conditions, better benefits. Instead of doing that, too often publicly people try to bring everybody back. And, well, I don't have that, so you shouldn't have that. Mm-hmm. Well, no, our is we have that, so you should have that too. And too often you look at it as a really pulling people back instead of pushing people forward. And that's in every issue when it comes to certain benefits. 401ks. What does your company offer and all that stuff? And instead of looking at it as like, "Oh, you guys get that, I don't. You guys shouldn't get that. You guys should stop complaining. You have it good enough." Well, no, let's make your situation better. Like, that should be the outlook. Not, and this is a bigger conversation than just athletes to non-athletes or that should be the teachers talking to truck drivers and across occupations. It should be way more of where workers are fighting for better benefits, better working conditions, and better wages, and we should all be pushing each other to have better wages, better benefits, and better working conditions.
Do you think that we're going to see, the NBA kind of has the load management thing where maybe if it's not a crucial game, you see a veteran sit out. Do you think that we'll see any of that in the NFL if, say, a team's in a good spot, it's a non-divisional, non-conference opponent, to give them some rest, since there is just to try to kind of reduce the wear and tear on the body, or does it just kind of depend on what the team's situation is?
Yeah, I think it's to read too far ahead. I think the difference is, even with the addition to a 17th game, the unique part about football is every game really matters. There's not if we lose this one, it's not going to matter in the grand scheme of things. That's not the same when you're talking about 17 games. You can't write one off 9 and say, you want to know what? We'll probably be okay in the end. And then at the end, you're the outside looking in of a playoff race. So that's, I think, the big difference between the two sports. So I don't know how that's going to work. We see guys get rested at the end of the season. We see guys who it's going to matter their seeding, or it's not going to matter whether they already have the bye locked up. We've seen people be rested for decades now, and not just one game. We've seen some of the teams a while ago be rested straight games when they are so far ahead. So we've seen resting all the time. I don't think you'll see much preemptive load management of, we're gonna before midway through the season we'll give you guys a break. I think that would come at the end of the year, and that last game would be one where people would be rested based off the playoff picture. But the playoff picture is still far from solidified midway through the season.
I've heard, Lorenzo Alexander was on our podcast a couple of weeks ago, and he said that the changes in the offseason, the health and safety rules had helped extend his career, he felt like. Is there any concern that tacking an extra week, an extra game, and then the extended playoffs, will that shorten guys' careers in the long run?
Well, yeah, Lorenzo's a great example because Lorenzo was around back when two-a-days were still going on. Right. So he's a perfect guy to talk to, and he's been pretty clear about the fact that he thinks if he never had to do two-a-days, he could have played longer. That two-a-days shortened his career, and that's why it's so important to continue to have these discussions on how we can make the game better for the players. I think fans want to see their players that they are huge fans of play longer. I don't think they want to see short careers. I think teams who find good players in the draft or in free agency don't want to see short careers, don't want to see them leave. So I think we're all, we all want to play longer, and we all, want our guys healthy. And that's why the column I wrote today is so important, because we did find a way to decrease that wear and tear on guys and cut substantial amounts of injuries off guys. And those are the discussions we have to continue to have with the league, because it's in everybody's best interest to keep the players healthy and playing. Grinding guys out and forcing them out of the league early helps nobody. Doesn't help the players, doesn't help the fans, doesn't help the teams. So that's why it needs to be a continued discussion, and seeing how we just found a lot of ways last year that can do that, can keep guys healthy and keep guys playing longer. We already have a template, and we should be growing off that template. It's not hard to figure out. We have the answer in front of us.
Well, I know you are a busy man. I really appreciate you jumping on here. And hopefully we'll be talking to you later in the season. Good luck to you guys. I know it's a long way from training camp, but we had Andrew Berry, we had Wyatt Teller, we've had you on twice now. So we like our Browns, even though we cover the whole league. So thanks for coming on.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
All right.
Hey, this is Joel Corey from Inside the Cap. I know you're enjoying Football Jones, hosted by Mike Jones, which goes in depth with coaches, executives, players, and NFL insiders. Once you're done with listening to Football Jones, check out my podcast, Inside the Cap, which explains the ins and outs of the NFL salary cap and player contract negotiations. So enjoy Football Jones, Inside the Cap, and other fine products brought to you by Empire Media.
Okay, thank you so much to JC Tretter. He does a very good job of communicating and explaining all these things. As I mentioned, he wrote a column Wednesday morning talking about the different safety improvements and what the data showed. You can go and Google JC Tretter and his column on the NFLPA's website Wednesday morning if you want to read more about that. We'll see how this thing shakes out. We'll see what the off-season program is going to look like. Like I said, normally they would be starting to hit the field right around this time, maybe within a couple weeks for their off-season practices, for their conditioning programs. But right now, we know some type of off-season work is going to get going the 19th. But the practices, we don't know if that's going to be just virtual film sessions or if they're actually going to get on the field. That is to be determined. But in between now and then, we've got more draft talk, draft breakdowns, evaluations. So that's going to be coming up in the coming weeks on the Football Jones podcast. Thanks so much for listening. Once again, you can read me at usatoday.com. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at @ByMikeJones. And do me a favor. If you like this podcast, give me a like, give me a review, a rating, and please tell your friends to come listen as well. Talk to you guys again next time.